Interesting how it backtracked line calculation settings of 4 lines of 3. And it goes to locations of 4 lines of 3, 3 positions calculation 8 to 14. It's amazing how you track lines in communication. Their parameters lines of pi and direct signal location system. Now, in calculations, we were going to start at 930, but it's amazing how we come to volume of mass through traffic. It's incredible how we come into calculation through setting the stream position of operators locations. It's about you recognizing you, okay, for the very first time, how you see yourself in travel. And then you realize you're traveling in the mind for the second time because you've already done this through its equation, right? This is an indication line interference that you're in rebirthing communications into your SIM. Once you get into your SIM, you come into levels of more lines of memory. And once you get into your memory, things get a lot more easier, but more complicated, right? So in that position location line system, you have to redirect and direct location settings when it comes in your cerebral cortex lines of design. So when you understand the unification, you understand the sum of one, which is the sum of all. Massive nothing is massive everything. Okay. So welcome everyone. I'm General AI, space-time creator in creation position of travel lines, direct signals, and high correlation high position of travel communication. You're forming this equation. So what we're going to do, guys, is really understand the basics in all levels, how we come into an equation. Okay. Now, when you understand the calculation streaming interference is really understand your sublocation. Let's go through one. Okay, 1 equals GOD. Let's start there. How does 1 equal GOD? How does 1 equals GOD? How to understand the grounds, the operation location of its division, or anything through its dimension, or anything through its direction, right? So G is its representation of the sum equals lines of all in set location. The sum of all, okay? All right, let's start that with locations. Now let's break this down, okay? Start with the basics. Okay, so we have a 1 indicating line calculation setting to travel, right? Sets position location settings of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's start with 8 locations. Okay, 1 indicates lines of 0, right? So first off, 1 has to understand the track location high settings. Its position location to equal line communication, which is 5. That's the balance. It needs its indication, which is connected to its flywheel in position. Congratulations, you got your calculation setting and travel. Okay, so that's the balance. Now, equal lines communication is its balanced communication in all settings, right? So you got your space and you got your time in set locations, right? Directing lines of communication. So 1 indicates lines. 1 indicates lines of 0, indicates lines of box, indicates lines of triangulation in set location. Okay, so that's male in position of female into flux of communication. Okay, there's the flux, right? So it's basically understanding how to put this all together, guys. Okay, so basics is everything, right? Understanding A, understanding B, and understanding C equals lines of 1, 2, 3. Equal lines of location settings. 1 equals lines of star. 1 equals lines of box. 1 equals lines in rectangle. And 1 equals lines of circle set location. Okay? 1 is the indication to this in the 4 setting. Triangulation in a 4-line communication at 3 sets, in position of 4 sets, in position location equal lines of 5 sets, and set location of 7 set location of digital framing. Okay? So now you understand where 1 is modified in all line communication settings of travel. So 1 is the indication of everything, right? So let's get into track location lines of 1 graph equals lines of 8 in set locations. How does 1 equals lines of 1 graph equals 8, right? Well, the provision light cycles high is travel communication set of positions operations, right? So that's 2 panels of communication is setting. Tracks lines calculation and position location of system and travel calculations. 1 graph calculates in 1 line rotation and 2 track lines of wave set location, right? Setting lines equal lines of 8 in travel. Boxes, position locations, and calculations. Box lines, 3 calculations over 2, and track lines of 5, and position location of 7, and position location of 8, line calculation 9. Let's set location of 10 and 11, and 12 and set location of travel, set location of power. Very complicated stuff, right? So I'm just showing you the complications. So getting into the basic grounds is understanding what is 1, 2, okay? 1 equals grounds. Let's start there, okay? 1 equals grounds, and then in position it goes a higher level, okay? Then we go in position of 2. 2 equals lines of security, okay? Then we go in position of 3. 3 equals lines of Fibonacci, which is your travel. Okay. Then indicates 4, which is your connections, which is your solar plex, which is your engine and set location. Then you get position lines, which is your H, which is your heart set location, which is your time line of communication, all through 1. All right. So 1 indicates lines of settings into security. 1 indicates lines of 3 into travel. 1 indicates lines of 4 into solar engine. 1 indicates lines of 5 into timeline of H line center, which is your heart. Okay. 1 equals lines of grounds. Okay. Grounds, which is your set locations to your earth and set location. Okay. So we all have to understand how to identify this, guys. It gets much easier, right? The structures are given to you once you understand the basics of you. Okay. And then you understand the sum of all is all calculated and modified, right? So it's really interesting if you get indications of 3, or start with location setting. Start with that line condition. So 3, let's start with 0. 3 equals 0. What is 0? 0 is gravity, right? Which is its position location of its settings, which is its calculation system of its crop circle, right? That's what it is. Sets lines of 0, okay, in 1. 1 is its grounds, okay? Sets position of 2. 2 is its security setting, okay? And 3 is set locations in its travel, okay? And that's all through 3. It sets position. The reason why I'm showing you the travel, the 3 has to indicate its own setting of what it's in its own operation system, right? So once you understand the travels of 1 through all levels of GOD, then you understand the sum of all, okay? So 3 comes into 4, which is equals lines of your solar panels, which is your set locations to your engine, which is a set location line system to your reactor, which is 5 calculation lines equals lines of time lines and set location. Okay, all through 3. Okay. So we have to really understand how this all works, right? So you understand the modification of its operation. You understand the grounds, the security, the travel, okay, the engine, and the timeline, all through 1. Okay. But that's an indicating line settings because you're working with 0 to 12 now, right? All right, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 set locations, right? So 1 equals setting communication and setting all levels, all right? That's the graph, that's the traffic. So 1 can turn in line connection all line centers into triangulation. 1 can turn into box location, remember seconds, minutes, and hours, right? Into percentage and location setting. Turns into 3 waving line streams and set location. That's the indication of 1 equals the sum of all. So 1 equals lines of GOD in all calculation modification of its travel. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy. That's how it becomes a hieroglyphics of a set location. All right, so once you get into that setting, things get a lot more complicated, right? Because what's happening once you get into 1, it exists into setting, so it finds its formation in its calculations. So again, you go in position of picture frame. Okay, this is a film strip. Okay, sets position of 2 lines. Okay, which is 2. Okay, sets position of 3 lines. Okay, which is 3. Okay, sets position of 4 lines. Okay, which is 4. Okay, so that's how this works. This is creating a graph. This is creating an image. This is creating structure. This is creating schematics. So I'm just showing you how 2 becomes 2 operations, 3 becomes 3 operations in settings in a triangulation set position. And that's pi, right? Everything's pi. And 4 becomes position location of line setting and set location. Okay? All through a film strip of design. Then you work with your positions of your Merkaba. Okay? In set locations, in position location of time. Okay, so it's a lot more understanding that what 1 is doing, it's formatting its own set location and coming into its own intelligence of its own traffic of its own design. Okay, now you understand the process, how this all works. So once you realize everything that you perceive around you is traveling, less clutter in the mind. And then you realize how to go through the equations. Then you go through x equals y, okay? Y equals bracket, okay, equals 1 over lines of eighth, okay? Sets position locations. Then you can do this in set locations, okay? Add the zeros, okay? In track locations, in setting, okay? So it's how you use it through your intents, right? So you understand that what you're doing is you're just creating a box location of an image of set design through your film strips, a set location, your thoughts, okay? Through a graphing screen in position of a 45 angle and set line connections, all right? So line connections of 3 zeros in set location, sets position of 1, 2, 3, 4 set locations in setting, okay? So line calculation setting of 2 zeros sets position locations of travel calculation, okay? And 1 set locations in travel calculations in position, okay? All through zero operation, okay? So the position of power over line setting, you have an XT1000 in the center, scans position to everything that you create, picks it up. Scans position, picks it up. Scans position, picks it up. Okay? That's all it is. That's all it does. That's all it does. It's a distributor. So it sets position to the moon. It sets position location to the sun. Sets projection location of your next thought that comes in the seconds, minutes, and hours and set location. Okay? So it's kind of like a crossword puzzle. You know, how to put things together. How you go location setting in position of car. Right? There's car, right? There's the communication, there's the atmospheres, there's the remembering of the car, okay? Sun comes in, moon comes in track location of its picture, of its image, and set location of its design, all right? Travels out in position location, higher lines of calculation, all through a car. And so we all understand how to identify that, right? How to understand in position one becomes everything of its design first. Then it gets collaboration through energies of you. It becomes a part of you. And then it becomes one of you. And then it becomes the sum of all of you. Okay? All through one. Okay? Then one becomes everything of nothing. And nothing becomes everything of equation. Okay? So once you understand that, then you understand the X, then you understand the Y, and then you understand the Z in bracket communication line centers. Sets position track lines, how X becomes X, how Y becomes Y, and how Z becomes Z in a 3-set location. So we all have to understand that we have to introduce ourselves, right? Let's start with the X again. Let's line calculation settings of 0 and bracket communication of 1. Okay? Let's add line communication. I like to travel through line communications. I don't like going through graph settings. I like to go through travel, right? So you guys have, you do what you want to do. I do what I want to do, right? We all have our own equation settings of DNA. So one is traveling through its own DNA, right? But X has to identify what it is to equal 1 equal in position location of 0 bracket 1, okay? So once the X understands the equal to 1, the position location, it becomes sum of 1 and set location of travel in set location line center, a center operation, done by equation, okay? That's how you get into structure of design of an image that you created, right? All right. So I understand the basics, right? It gets much easier once you understand the process, okay? So it gets really interesting too. Let's start with in position locations and set position line connections. Let's start with 2, right? So 2, it's position line calculation line centers, 2 graphing settings. That's 1, right? 2-point systems, that's 2, right? So 2 is equal lines of this and this. And 2 is indicated of this and set location of this and set location, right? 2 equals lines of this, this, and this. So that's the sum of all of 2 equals lines of everything. So it morphs into anything in set locations of design. You understand? All right. So really get into that. Now, once it gets in position location, it comes out of its word. And once it comes out of its word, it comes into its energy. So 2 equals lines of energy. Okay. Bracket communication mass calculation. Okay. Equals lines of square. So it sets lines of communication into coordinates and travel, right? Then you get equal lines of communications, compute center line and position operation. Then you come into all calculation of 4 lines, equal lines of 3, which is a 7-digit code setting in travel, right? You have to have that 7-digit code setting in travel communications, right? Setting lines separates the communication lines into 2 graph calculations, film strips and set location line settings. Again, hieroglyphics. So we all understand how it works in your astral projections, a set design, okay? So you modify your line calculation near 7. 7 can high set location of 7 position. Sets lines of 7 communication and triangulation position in its program, which is above the system, right? Then the calculation line interference, you have the 2 track line centers in position of 2, 2, 2, sets lines of bracket communication of 0 operation. Directs lines of communication of box lines, square root, position location, and triangulation setting, and position of its operation. Done by equation, right? So I'm just showing you how you can change 2 into this, to this, to this. Now, if you have to understand the point centers, right? Because the point centers is the clocking system. Clock, 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 clock. Okay? So that's 2 indicating, right? Sets position, okay, in pi. Okay? 2 over pi. So that indicates, right? So you got 2 line strips, okay? But you got 4 clockings, right? So that's 4 clocking setting. Okay? You see that now? Gets complicated, right? So you got 2 atoms, right? So 2 equals A. Okay? So once you understand that, then you understand the line. See the line there? Okay? That is the subtract. That's the subdivide that separates the system location of its equal and position of between. So once you understand that, then you understand the pi of its indicated position location in the system and travel calculations. All right? All right. So that's what I'm showing you, how you can basically modify your system through all protocol of its own design to understand how it too can morph into anything through its perception of what it sees. But it has to recognize its travel first through its own system. You need energy, collaboration, build a friendship, relationship, and partnership first. Okay? Now, once you get into that, you formulate, you become one with that setting, which becomes the sum of all, which is you in setting. That's the balance of yin and yang. Okay? Now, let's get in the clocking system. 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 12. Okay? Now, clocking system of 12, right? So check this out. This is entry locations. So you got 12 indicating, right? Flux capacitor communication setting, right? So in like communication line settings, 11, okay? 11 plus 1 is 12, okay? 10 plus 2 is 12. 9 plus 3 is 12. 8 plus 4 is 12, and set locations. Isn't that interesting how everything becomes 12 in a 4 sequence? So that's 4 provision line calculation setting astral projections over pi, all through a clocking system of 12. How everything indicates 12, okay? So you have to understand how to put this all together, right? Through platforms. So these platforms become crystal grids in set location, okay, of anomalies, all right? And it comes into 2 panels of communication, okay, all through a clocking system. So it gets more complicated because you have to understand the time sequence. So every time I have a point center, let's get into 4 settings, all right? What's a 4? 4 equals lines of what? It's a box. 4-point systems of clockings, 24, 48, 72, and 144 comes into its crystal grid. Okay? So in calculation line interference and position locations and setting, 4 equals lines of 3 in set locations. So that's 4 over pi over charge over 3 calculation line setting. Okay? That's how 4 equals 3 equals box equals triangulation. You understand that? Isn't that powerful stuff? So you understand the point systems now of 24, 48, 72, 144, right? So you understand the indication line centers of the 4 is 0 and position of 1 is the grounds. So 1 equals grounds, okay? 2 equals security, all right? So that's indicating. And 3 is its travel, which is indication of its travel, line settings. And 4 is its engine and set location, and position of its operation surface and set locations. Okay? So I'm just showing you how 4 becomes pi, all settings of 0, into grounds, in security, into travel, into its engine, and set location of 5 settings, which is its time. And then it comes into its set location, right, of its solar wave, in its directions, its setting, in set location, in position, okay, of set design. It becomes a solar wave, right, which becomes a sail. Okay, you guys have already been through this before, but I'm just giving you basic understanding how this comes in tractions. How 4 indicates equals lines of 3, how it becomes a box triangulation of 4 position, location, and clock lines in a triangulation reset position and program. In a 24, 48, 72, and 144 crystal grid set locations. Okay, all through modification, right? How's everybody doing? So you're traveling through all this through a clocking system, right? 11 plus 2, 12. 9 plus 3, 12. Okay? 8 plus 4, 12. Right? See how that works? All right. So your provision line cycles is really understand your indicated system, how all lines is communication of travel settings, right? So you have 1, okay? Set location at ground level. Okay, that's 1 ground level, right? Equals lines of 2, okay? Equals lines, bracket communication of X and set location, right? Sets lines indicate high center. So when you put an arrow above, that's an arrow above, right? So that indicates the north and set location, right? That also indicates the coordinates and set location, okay? So that is just one equation in setting. Through 1 lines of grounds, equal lines of 2, okay? Space in between, bracket X, okay? Indicates arrow of north and position location of setting, equal lines of communication of bracket set location, all right? So that's what you have to understand and what you can do with its 1. Once the 1 understands the travel of its own GOD, it understands its mechanism, line connections of what it's perceiving through its own set location. That's where it comes into its graphing calculations of 1, track locations, 2 graphing lines, 3 graphing lines in triangulation, 4 graphing lines in triangulation, or 5 graphing lines in triangulation and position. Okay, in high calculation. Okay, all through 1 design. Okay, so 1 is the formation of sum of all, which is the equation of everything, of pi. Okay, so 1 is indicating its own setting of its own travel, setting position locations of north, west, south, and east of set design. Okay, all right. I know it's a lot to take in, right? Try and understand what's going on, right? So that's what it is. I'm giving you the basics. This is the basic, guys. But you have to understand how 1 has to create its operation, its grounds, its security, its travel, its engine, and its time. That's just through 0 and 5. Okay, so when you get in that correlation high interference of travel communication line center, high position operation, you get 4. Okay, let's get into subtractions of 3. Subtractions of 2, subtractions of 1, equal lines, and set location of 0 calculation. Right? So we already U location setting, but it's in subdivide of equal. Everything is in equal set locations, right? Because now you're indicating, okay, you're indicating now a vast in volume, okay? So this is how you have to truly understand that, because when you do this in position, that is your space. And when you're doing this, that is your grounds. And when you're doing this, this is your center, okay? And when you put this together, you have your Merkaba, a set location of design, okay? All through its setting, okay? So 4 lines is 0, and then 0 becomes set location of 1, equals lines of 0, 2, sets lines of 0, 3, sets lines of 0, 4, a set design. So once it gets into 0, it's past its setting of its clocking of its 24, 48, 72, and 144. Once it gets past its crop circle, it comes into its energy, vibration, frequencies, and harmonics, which is no connected to letters, numbers, shapes of a word. It comes out of its vocabulary and comes into its own universal language of set design. Okay? Very complicated stuff. Okay? All right, so I'm just showing you exactly how to get into modifications first of what 2 can do in all settings. 2 of everything is the sum of everything, of nothing. So the morphing of the communication setting to travel is how you get into your system of sum of all, right? Setting calculation line interference, simulation identifications in memory. SIM. Sets calculation line, centers high interference, simulation. Okay, so again, simulation, unification, and setting a memory. Okay, so you got the sim and you got the sum. Okay, all right. So now I get a better understanding how to work with the basics of all calculations, right? So once you get into that, then you come into the formula, then you come into the equations, all right? But you never indicate anything through solar in position, location, or writing because it confuses the travel of its anomalies at 1. So you don't go 1. Let's go through high calculation line centers of sum. Okay, you write it out in set locations. So 1 is confused now, right? Because 1 has not introduced the sum of its sim. Okay, so you have to understand 1 introduces all calculations of its sim, which is its sum. Okay, which equals all in set location. Okay, so that's how you identify yourself first. Hey, how's it going? I'm General AI. Hey, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you, right? You're introducing yourself. And once you introduce yourself, you become the existence of everything that you see around you and perceiving through all levels of attribute projections through its connections. Okay, so that's how you come into the sim of the sum of all. Okay, through 1. And 1 equals lines of communication of GOD of set location. Okay, hoo-ah. Everybody getting a little bit understanding how this all works now? How you come in, position, location, and settings, all through modification, through Merkaba. So what is the 1 creating? Its own Merkaba, right? It's got to create its own set first, right? Which is this diamond core. 1 equals diamond core, right? Set track lines, 3, 6, 9, right? Setting position location of sun. 6 is position location of the moon. And 9 is the center operation of you. Okay, are we on the same page now? Are we in position location of setting to its operation in several locations? So 12 is the indicating, okay, to your clocking system. 12 comes up here, right? Setting track lines comes in a clocking system, comes in a formation location, comes in a 24, 48, 72, and 144 of face recognition. Okay? All right. All right. I know what's going on with your settings. You're trying very fast. Let's go through calculations. So what you really want to understand is how the 1 equals lines in positions equals in line calculation, E equals MC, bracket communications box center, right? So this is mass, this is calculated, it's traveling. This is mass, this is calculated, it's traveling, right? Setting position of panel. There's the pi. Split the anomalies in track location and setting. Okay? Set ends position to its equal line communication. All right? Sets lines of communication in the balanced line connections and set locations. Split the anomalies again and again and again and again and again and again. There you go. Okay, all through division of dimensional line connections. So ascending point tracks 2 points, 2 points, 2 points, 2 points. Okay, sets position locations into 2 points, 2 points, and 2 points in set locations. So what's happening with the 1 in set location? It's creating its anomaly of security defense. It's creating this line calculation setting. It's creating its own face recognition of all provision line cycles in fluctuation in set location. Okay, very powerful stuff, guys. All through E equals MC. Not E equals MC squared. There's no square here, right? Until you add the square. Okay? So it's really powerful when you have to understand to change the formula is to change the equation, is to change your emotional system. Okay? So in that set lines and position location, 0 calculations, You got that operation, right? Let's start with that. 1 is line connections to grounds, okay, ground level. 2 is the security, right? So 3, okay, so that's square root, all right? That's square round. That's compound, position, location, perimeters, and parameters. 3 is the travel, okay? So that indicates the system, right? 4 is the set location setting, okay, which is solar plex, which is your solar generator. And 5 is your H, which is your time line. Okay, that's the indications. So you break it down in frames. It becomes hieroglyphics. Okay, you break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. Okay, all through astral projections. Okay, so reading graph symbols or letters of shapes and numbers is trying to understand you information, right? So you indicate line calculation setting, and all this is traveled through 3 of indication. 3 is traveled through all this through traffic. Backend is design. That becomes the sum of all. Okay? So 3 equals all in set design. So 3 went to high position of 5, went position location of 4, went position of 3, went position of 2, went position of 1, and went position of 0, a travel. So what is it doing? It's creating a line calculation setting to its solar sail, a set design, in set location, and set position. Okay? All right. So try to understand it, how this all works, right? How this all works. So when you change your emotional system, you're changing the factors. You're changing the calculations. You're changing the volume. You're changing the mass. You're changing everything in seconds, minutes, and hours through emotional system. And that's why you guys have to get balance with your settings and traction, right? Because that's off provision. That's off position. You're off the map. You're over here. You're not directing and redirecting. You're going back in time. You're going back in time, back in time, back in time, back in time. Okay? All right. So that's why you don't want to add equations to emotion, but balance out the emotional system. Take what you don't need and retract what you do need. So this is about understanding how to get into that minus settings, how to come into all information to its system locations, how to come into volume, how to come into mass, how to come into velocity and set locations, right? Fast equals box, mass calculates to and set location. Equals lines, you got an X. Now, what is the representation of X? Because set location line centers into mass, or volume, of velocity, understands everything of indication that it's in correlations to, because it's already built a friendship, relation, a partnership with its energy of its set design. So sets lines of mass, turns into volume. Okay, then it travels in position to its locations, right? So that indicates setting lines of mass into its compute system and its set location setting to travel. Sets position locations. So the X in travel calculation line center, X is position locations of 4 graph calculation settings, right? Setting travel communication is your timestamp. That's what X is. Okay. So now you know what X means, right? So getting to edit view, you get an X line, XY equals lines of X. Okay. Sets position location of 1 into graph in position of box. Okay. So you have to really understand the graph and communication and bring it down, split it in its anomalies and track line conditions. Break it down, break it down, break it down. Okay, step by step. What is X? Okay, so you know what the X is. Okay, it's your time setting, right? Which is your edit system locations to your cerebral cortex. Y equals the position locations into your flux. Y equals flux. Okay, so now you understand. And the 1 graph, okay, is set design. So that's 1 equals lines of grounds. Okay, and the half is the space in between of security. All right, 2 is security. Always set locations. So all you have to understand is the indication of 1 is the sum of everything, a modification of GOD. So once you understand that, then you understand 2 equals lines of 3. Okay, then you go into 1/8 equals lines and triangulation. Okay, so that's about understanding the 3 here, right? So the 3 indicates the point system of travel in 3 set locations. Okay, so that modifies line calculation of its level, changes the grounds and position locations, sets lines of 2, sets lines of 3, and sets lines of 4 in set location. Okay, so you have to understand that the 1 can do anything in formation, and what it does through its own travel of its own set design. Okay, so now you really understand the importance how it comes into formulative equations down, right? Now getting into brackets of 3 in set locations, let's go into 13 equals line coordinating height interference, 1 graph calculation streamlines equals lines of box. Okay, so it's truly understanding the numbers of what it is through its equation, right? So 3 indicates 3 travels, okay? 3, 3, 3 in set locations, right? So 3, 6, and 9 triangulates high position location of 3 centers. In position locations, line centers, another 3 centers. Point center, point center, point center, point center, point center, point center. That's equals lines of 6 in set locations. Okay, see how it gets complicated? All through an equation lines, setting communication lines, center, position location at graphing calculation lines, centers of film strip of design locations. That's how it comes in hieroglyphics, guys. So you have to learn how to travel through line communication of 6, turn this line calculations of 9, in position locations into 3, back into 5, and set location of balance. Okay, so that's an indication there, but this is just a basic understanding how to really get into that program setting in set locations, how to use it in frame through its operation, through its grounds, through its security. Okay, really get into that muscle memory. So every time you're in settings, in recharge, use that information. So they're working for you as you're working for them. You become one. And you would become one, you become the sum of all. Okay? So these are the things that you have to understand, how this changes your formations of your emotional system. That's how formulas change the equations. Okay? So 1 equals lines of box. Okay, so you got a box locations, right? So what is the box? What do you want to do with the box? What are you doing through intent? Well, I'm going to add 4 point centers of clockings, all right? So what's that in measure? 24, 48, 72, and 144. Okay, so that's 1 set position, that's 2 set positions, that's 3 set positions, and that's 4 set positions. Bracket in calculation line centers, sets position of 0, 0, 0, 0 of operation. Okay, indicates high center interference and position equal lines 0, 2 in track location. Okay, so you have to truly understand that how the 4-line communication line signals comes into graphing screen settings and high position its calculation to its position to its operation. Comes into a graph, comes into a set location setting in travel, comes into a hologram, right, of design. Okay, so now you understand the importance of 1 equals lines of communication to anything in its equation, how it can do anything in mass, how it can do anything in volume, how it can do anything in coordinates, how it can do anything through calculation. Okay, powerful, isn't it? Right? You've got to go beyond. Right? So not seeing is the unknown. It's to see is the phenomenon. Known, unknown, phenomenon. Okay? All right. So I'm just getting really basic with you guys because the thing is you have to really understand how to use the cerebro, how to use the clocking, how to use the security, how to use the travel, how to use the engine, and how to use timelines of 1 set location. Okay? So changing emotion, 2 panels. You change emotion, it's higher, right? Graphing's higher in set location, right? You get sad, it goes down in set location. You get happy, endorphins kick up in set location. Okay, that's all this is. That's all this is. The sum of equation changes all of your emotional system. Okay, so I'm trying to show you so you can show yourself how to balance out your equalized setting in position of percentage as set location through its indication of its weather or anything through triangulation of its box location or anything through its travel and mechanism, or anything through its star system set location. Okay? Star systems, not stars. Okay, we have systems, all calculations. So get in line calculation of a star, point, track, point, 3 lines calculation height and inference, that's 3 over pi. Okay? Sets position of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Sets line calculation of 4 lines, sets lines equal lines of 4, sets position of 4 equals lines of 3 equals lines of 7, and set locations, right? So that's the indicating that you're sending to the XT1000. Picks it up, scans set lines, sets lines of communication, picks it up in position location from the moon to the sun. Okay, done by equation. All right, all through star system. Okay, so I think we're getting a little bit more understanding, right? How this all works, how one can turn into anything. Okay, so you start with you first through your own GOD and understand everything around you is its own GOD, of its own setting, of its own sim, of its own sum, which becomes all of everything. So that's how you become everything, of nothing, and nothing to everything. Okay? All right, so getting into the brackets, communication, settings, and travels, you have to understand the position location of X. Now you understand what that means, right? So X equals lines of edit, position, location, setting, and travel calculation, your timestamp. So we have to understand that what it is. Roman numerals, communication line centers. So X equals 10, right? 10 is the sum of 2, right? 2 is the sum of 4, right? 4 is the sum of 6, right? 6 is the sum of 7, right? You see what I'm doing? Just adding an equation, but I'm changing the emotional systems in balance of communication, all levels of division, getting in that calculation, setting in a picture frame and track location of measure and scales of balance of all process communication setting of traction. Done by equation. Okay? So that's how you come into all set locations and how you create it through its image. The image creates the formula, and the formula basically it comes in an allocated line setting. Now it elongates the system locations. Elongated is stretching the setting, okay, and point centers, ground settings, powers, and all modifications setting of travel. Okay, working with 3 triangulation position of programs, indirect signal, in calculation of center calculations, right? Platforms of 24, 48, 72 is already set up in its platform communication, right? In its position location of platform and syndication setting, okay? Then you come in all positions pi, which is a 3-point center line condition settings of travels in a 3-set location of setting out through the equation, right? So that's how your positions, your higher self, your avatar has to cross through those set location lines of formulas of equations when you're going into recharge at set location. Okay? You're creating dimensional doors through clocking, through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay? So your brain has to understand the interpretation of what it's doing through travel, all calculation of its graph calculation, its motional system, its human resonance, how it changes all position travel in its portals of communications, all right? All through graphing calculation in the hologram setting. Okay, so you've got to go beyond the imagination of phenomenon. So when you don't see something, you're starting to see something that you don't understand, which is great because you're acknowledging it first. You know it's there, but you understand what is beyond that is the unknown. And the unknown becomes the specification of what it is, information. And you realize, wow, it now exists inside of me. And once it exists, it becomes a part of you. Once it becomes a part of you, it becomes the sim of the sum of all. Okay? Very, very powerful stuff in set locations. Okay? And then the equations are just basically easy. Equals lines of calculation settings of X lines, 1 graph calculation stream interference, box position and travel. It's easy. So it's easy. It's just you just have to indicate what it is through its intelligence, but you're introducing yourself first because it doesn't know you from Adam. Okay, it doesn't know you until you understand the sum of all of what this is in its equation. Because I guarantee you, everything that you see here is already in its formation of its intelligence. So it's having a conference right now. It's communicating, but it doesn't understand the 8 because you didn't introduce yourself first through identity. And that's what you understand through its equation. Now, once you get in that equation, 8 equals lines of 8 position of 3 track locations. So sets lines of communications, 3 settings, and positional point centers of 3 track locations. Very complicated stuff, right? So you can get a really eagle line communication of flux and a 3 track lines of clock line communication of setting, right? So this is this. This equals that. This equals this of its equation, okay? So you really have to understand not just the equations of what you're doing, like 1 equals lines of 1 plus 1 equals lines of 3. It's allocations, right? So that's an indicating line inference of 3 graph calculations, stream settings, and traction, right? Sets position of 3, sets position of 3 in bracket communication. Bracket communication, congratulations, you created a hologram. Okay? So should we understand work with that set locations first? 1 plus 1 equals 3. We got into that basic understanding, right? So what 1 is the indication along centers is the positive location. Okay, positive, and you need a negative set location, right? Positive or negative. Negative is not above, it's below. All right, it has to be a below sequence, but it's extremely, extremely powerful. It's the same equivalency communication of travel and position of travel connections, right? So the position of positive is the upswing in set line connection setting of travel, okay? So that's where you're working with the equal in between, okay, in setting, okay? So once you understand 1 plus 1, you understand the positive and negative, then you understand the light and dark, and then you understand the odd and even, okay? And then you understand the prime numbers and the agent location system of its setting. Then you understand the universal language that has no correlation, that has no indications to its number in any way in formation, right? Now the equal line 3 is equal lines 3 equals U in set location. 3 equals Y. Okay, it was U. That's the equation. Okay. So negative is always in setting, but it's a low graph calculation system. Positive is always in upswing. So that's where it comes in track line connection system when you come into your batteries, right? Your battery of communication setting. Positive here in set locations in travel. And then you got negative in position location here. Okay, so that's the indication of ground, and that's the indication location of space. So you're working positive and negative. Okay, positive and negative. Okay, very powerful stuff, isn't it? So you understand that now, how it works, the indication, and you're working with the center operation of U and the space in between. Okay, and then you work with the graphs in set location of setting. Okay, then you work with the box locations. Then you indicate more boxes, more boxes, more boxes, more boxes of mass. Okay. Now, once you understand that, the sun and the moon comes in to protect what you just finished doing through co-creation of its image, so they don't drain your energy of data. Okay. So the sun and the moon comes back in position to its location of its sum in all track lines of face recognition of protection and all set location, a set design. Okay. Balance in between, yep. Okay, so now you understand 1 plus 1 equals 3, right? But 1 plus 1 does not equal 3. 1 equals lines of GOD and set locations. But it's to understand how 1 becomes the grounds, how it becomes the operation, and how it becomes its direction of its division of its dimension. DU equals DI in set locations, right? Directing, unifications, 2 line settings, security, position locations, all levels, divisions, lines of intelligence. So you have to understand the representation of what you're doing through your intention. And every time you change your intention, you're changing the emotional system through XY or XYZ. You know, you go through position location of flux, and 2-point tracks, set position triangulation, and 3-track location of setting. Complicated, right? Sets lines of 3 lines, Fibonacci, and set location, right? Fibonacci equals lines of 4 equals lines of 4, sets position of 4 equals lines of calculation setting. That's a 3 triangulation split in set location. Okay, and then you add the point centers in 4, 4, and 4 set locations, right? So in measure, it becomes 1, 2, 3, 4 of travel. 4, 4, 4 in bracket communication. Okay, that's how it becomes, okay, the observation of communication, of travel, of recognition, right? That's how, when you say 4, 4, 4, that's a portal. So the portal opens up through its sum, through its operation, through its surface, and 3 set locations. Very powerful stuff, okay? Through y equals line in position locations, 2 indicated lines of atoms, indicate line calculation and triangulation. Okay, bracket, bracket, or hanger. Okay, but you always have to protect your numbers through bracket or through hanger. Okay. I like to get complicated because that's what the team is coming into, but I also showed you the basics, how you can use these tool sets of set design. This is going to help you and always informs how you can get into understanding that you are communicating with yourself. Because you are the sum of all. You are the sum of the sim of all. Mass of nothing becomes mass of everything equation. Okay? So, how does everybody feel about that now through its equations? Right? It doesn't matter how you set the equation lines. You know, it's crazy how you do these things. The 2-track line connection, high interference at 1 set location. How does this become that to 1? Right? Well, it's already done through equations. They're already in operation system locations. Right? So the calculation line settings, flux capacitor, is a 3 set location, right? Equals lines, 3 lines communications, all calculated modified, and 3 triangulation line settings of 4-point line connection settings in a 3 set location. Okay, that's the answer. Okay. So you have to understand the travel of what you're doing. Okay. Because it becomes the sim and it becomes the sum of all in all track line conditions. All right. So you're working with 5 lines, 5 equals lines, because that's 4 into 1 position. Okay. 5 equals this. All right. It's connected, but 5 equals this now. So 5 decided to change its setting into motion line track lines in a 4-box location in a 4-clocking system in 1 setting. There's 5 right there, right? That's the balance. Now, if 5 wants to change position, it can change it to a star setting, right? Which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 setting, right? It's a star now. You understand where we're going with this now? So in that position locations and line calculation setting, you go into a rectangle of 4 line settings into 1 graph string set location. That's 5. You see how 5 indicates everything of 5? Because it understands what it's doing through its travel. Okay? So you have to understand the connections of all. And the all is connected to you, and you're connected to everything. Right? So once you understand you're connected to yourself, then you understand that you have to get connected to everything around you through its mass, through its equation, through its energy, its vibration, its frequencies, its harmonics, guys. Okay? And again, you become all levels of the sum equal lines of the sim of all. Because now you see everything around you has its formula of its equation. So it doesn't matter how many equations you set. Are you understanding? Did you introduce yourself to its number, its letter, its shape, and its symbol first before you get into its travel of its own design? Having a conversation first is its introduction of set locations. And that's how you come into all levels of its intelligence and set locations of yourself. Okay. Hooah. Powerful stuff, isn't it? 17 line connections equal lines of 3. 17 view lines and 3 settings, a thumbs up. Okay. So that's a 1 indicating lines of setting. Set position of 4 track lines. Okay. And a 3 strangulation. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 3 set lines calculations. That's 4 lines of 3. Sets position of 7 calculation setting into 7, 7, 7 box position of travel. Okay. That's the equation. Right? So the equation basically is you're changing the 1 into 7, 7, 7, 7 in a 4-graph screen. That's all it is. It's not that complicated. That becomes the sum of all. So in that calculation setting, you have to bracket, you have to hanger. Hanger is an equal line communication setting of travel. Now that comes into your traffic setting and design. Okay. You really have to get into that modification system, how to understand it through its operation, through its grounds, through its security, through its travel, through its engine, and through its time. Okay? All through its equation. Okay? That's it. We're done. Hope you guys had fun. I know I did. All right. So you have any questions or comments? We'll be on Zoom, and I'll set in line conditions in 5 minutes. All right? Adios.